This part's back on here.
It was something like that.
Okay. Well, so I took off, obviously I took off the whole pericardium, that's all taken off, and I cut off most of the vasculature on the base. I've dissected away the anterior wall of the left ventricle and most of the right ventricle here to open it up. So we're not going to really see the papillary muscles, but if you open it up a little bit, you can certainly see the textured wall of the left ventricle there. These are all the trabeculae in there. This is one big papillary muscle that's still intact. And we know the difference between those two because we can see the chordae tendineae arising off of the papillary muscles, these things, okay, the heartstrings. Those are clearly coming off of the papillary muscle here, big dome-shaped muscle. Whereas the trabeculae don't have anything like that. They're just the ridges in the back, okay? You know, 3 layers, so this is epicardium, the shiny layer we see here, and this is all myocardium, very, very thick. And then the epicardium is the shiny layer that we have in here, and we could grab a hold of that with tweezers and pull it up so you'd see it. But epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. All right, this structure here is the interventricular sulcus with the fat in it, and then that's the anterior interventricular artery and the great cardiac vein running in there. You come up here, and then there are the auricles. So that's the left auricle, and over here is the right auricle. That's our right atria and left atria. Right. As far as valves, so between the left atrium and the left ventricle, I open up this, I cut that little bit out there so we can look into the canal. And what we're exposing right there, that's the left AV valve, this white, and the chordae tendineae coming down off of the cusps. So this structure right here is actually the valve. Okay. And I'm lifting up the anterior cusp right there, and I lift some of the muscle attached. And then the heartstrings coming down off of the cusps, and these would attach to the papillary muscle. So I left that intact so you could see it, what it would look like in there. Go over to the right. So what are the 3 names of this valve? Left AV, bicuspid, and mitral valve. Okay. Then on the right side, okay, again, I cut open the right ventricle here. There was the right auricle, so the coronary sulcus passed here. Now I've cut through this to show you some of the structures. I cut the papillary muscles, so you can see this stump right there. That's the end of one of the papillary muscles. So I've cut all that out, and then here, you can see this white. That's the fibrous skeleton of the heart. There's actually a connective tissue ring structure that all the muscle is anchored on. And it's non-conductive, so that actually electrically isolates the atria from the ventricles. So the only way we can get extra ventricles to pass from the atria to the ventricles is through the bundle of His. So it won't pass through the myocardium. Well, that's also the anchor point for the valve. So in this one, I cut the valve out. So this took some time, but that is the valve. Okay, you can see, you can open it up. You can see why in the models they show it like a little basket like that, because it really is, but it takes some time to get that butchered out. So that was attached in here to that framework. So that's where it sat. And I left the chordae tendineae are still on there, as you can see those. I think at least one of them, this is so that's the cone of a papillary muscle right there in my fingers. And you can see how it's got the chordae tendineae going up to the cusps. There's another attachment. Here's another one. So I just tried to shave those off. That's a real nice one there. You can see that, how that would work. Okay, so that was attached there. So obviously I cut that one out. Right. So if we unfold this and look in here, you can see those ridges in there. What are these ridges up here?
Pectinate.
Right, those are pectinate muscles. And they're a lot thinner and more parallel than they are in the ventricles, but same basic function. Okay, then, so here we're still in the right ventricle, right? But I'm coming over to this bulge, this anterior bulge, which is the conus arteriosus. And I cut a little flap in there. All right, and we lift that up. And what we're looking at, again, the very first thing I had to identify was the pulmonary trunk, right? So my finger's going from the pulmonary trunk there. So what I would expect to find, right, the conus arteriosus, where it goes in the pulmonary trunk, I should find the pulmonic semilunar valve. So I'll flip this up. Okay. And that is what this is right here. See that thing that I'm picking up? That's one of the cusps. There's one there. There's one here that I partially cut. And then there's a third one right there. So you see those? So what happens is the blood goes in there, and then when the heart goes into diastole, the blood kind of sags back a little bit, fills these up like a filled hammock or a sail on a ship, and they expand and then they slap together, and that's what makes the valve close. Okay. All right. So very different structures, right? Semilunar valves are very, very different than the AV valves. Okay. So that's 3 of the valves that we can see. The aortic semilunar valve is deep. It's way back in here. And so we're not really gonna be able to see it, but if I pull that open, there's just a dark little cavern we go down into there where my finger is pointing. That's the aortic vestibule. That's where the blood's gonna go out through the aorta. And if I follow that up, I'll see the aortic semilunar valve. But to visualize that, you kind of got to butcher through the back of the heart or cut the whole base off, which I'll do, but once I do that, you lose all the vessels, so I didn't want to cut through that yet. So let's go over the blood vessels you can find. Okay, so what blood vessels should we have entering into the right atrium? Well, this is participatory. Right, the vena cava, superior and inferior. In a pig or a sheep, it's a ventral and a superior. They don't have an inferior. But just the same, now I've kind of cut it up, but if you can get your finger in there, okay, clearly I'm popping out here into what was the right atrium. So if I twist my hand around, okay, popping out down here on the bottom, that's the inferior vena cava, and up here is the superior vena cava. You can kind of get an idea of how that would work. Okay, they're attached like that. Then the aorta, which I'm in here now, I cut a lot of it off. This is aorta here, and then this was the brachiocephalic here. The left common carotid came off here, and then as it continues, it becomes the subclavian. So this is actually the aortic arch. Now if I go through this, my finger will pop out. Do it right. And you can just see the blue in my glove. Right there, okay? So I've gone through the aorta, right down into the left ventricle. Now we come back here, left atrium, and you know that, you pop your finger in there, you can see it coming out there, poking around the edge of the left atria. And if I feel around there, now this has been butchered off, so they're not intact anymore. I don't think any of them are here. But now I've opened up the back of the left atrium, and so really where my fingers are there and there, that's where the two sets of pulmonary veins would come in. Okay, but when it was cut out of the animal, they just cut it, which is pretty common. Other than that, let's see, that's probably about everything I'd ask you to try to find. Other than that, there's little nuances you can find which are kind of fun. Like, so here where I cut through the coronary sulcus, I exposed the right coronary artery, which is that thing right there. That's the end of it. Okay, and if I dug around in here, I'd find the left coronary artery underneath there as well. Well, I think that's probably all I'd ask you to identify. You know, you're going to get things like, usually I ask 4 questions, so there's going to be some kind of exterior structure or myocardium, epicardium, endocardium, something like that. Trabeculae, pectinate muscle, papillary muscle, chordate tenonate. You're going to have to identify one of the valves for sure. And then maybe a blood vessel. And when I do the blood vessels, I take one of these and I stick it through, and so you can see both ends. So really, if you can identify the chamber, you should know what vessel it is. Any questions? Okay, guys.